Good morning, Dr. Bell. Thank you so very much for agreeing to participate in our scientific journey endeavor. We're pretty much really interested in trying to find out the different paths and explore the different paths individuals take to attain their scientific goals and their scientific profession. So, would you mind starting off telling us a little bit about yourself, some background information? For instance, where were you born, your undergrad, and what you're currently doing right now?
Okay. I was born in Morristown, Tennessee, which is about 45 minutes northeast of Knoxville, in a rural community. And I went through school in the Hamilton County public school systems. I had always thought from the beginning that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to college. I went to a small Baptist college near my home, about 20 minutes away, called Carson Newman College, and did a teacher education program there and prepared to be a home ec teacher. And got my college degree, worked for a few years as a high school teacher. Ended up deciding that that was not what I was meant to do. Ended up going to graduate school, and now I'm a professor of psychology at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Fantastic. So what influenced you then to change your mind and pursue going to graduate school? And what did you go to graduate school for?
Well, I actually changed my mind while I was an undergrad, and I was a home economics major as an undergrad, and my teaching certificate is in home economics education. I was also certified to teach math. I was a math minor, and I began to change my mind about my junior year in college. I really enjoyed being a college student. I enjoyed the classes I took, the lab classes I took, and I really liked the relationships that the college professors had with the students. And I remember thinking, this is really good. This is what I want. I want this kind of a life, a professor interacting with college students as opposed to a teacher interacting with teenagers. But I finished my college degree and ended up doing my student teaching and getting my teaching certificate, and I taught high school for 5 years. I taught high school home economics for 5 years. 1 year at a little tiny school system in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, a very small school, and then 4 years at the time it was the third largest high school in the state of Tennessee, and Farragut High School in Knoxville. So I had a very different experience. But the whole time I was teaching, I knew I would eventually return to graduate school. There were other life circumstances that kept me from going to graduate school immediately, but that was always on my mind from the time I was about a junior in college.
So it seems that you yourself were encouraging yourself to pursue a scientific career, a scientific path. So you said that certain things influence you, such as your classes. Any specific classes or any specific professor?
Yeah, my favorite professor as an undergrad was a woman named Sarah Sanders, and I admired her so much. She was really tough and really made you work hard, and yet just had a heart of gold. And you could either be scared by her, or you could stick around and get to know her and see what an incredible professor and what an incredible mentor she was. And I had so many classes with her. I had an opportunity. At a small school, you have lots of classes with the same professor. So I had an opportunity to get to know her. She was a mom. She was actually a widow. She was raising 4 children on her own. And I just admired that so much, that she could be a college professor, a successful college professor, and raise 4 children and just be terrific at what she did. So I think she's the one, although she really didn't encourage us to go to grad school, I liked her life and liked what she saw, what what she projected. So that when I was teaching high school in Knoxville, I was actually working on my master's degree part-time at the University of Tennessee. So I was a full-time teacher and a part-time master's student at Tennessee. And I decided of all of the topics within home economics that I found the most interesting, it was child and family studies. So I did my master's degree part-time at University of Tennessee. I actually did it in 2.5 years with a thesis while teaching full-time. And then knowing that I needed a PhD in order to be a college professor. So I did the master's part-time while I was teaching high school, putting my husband through a second undergraduate degree. Got married after undergrad, and Cliff decided to get a very different undergraduate degree that required 4 more years of education at the University of Tennessee. So I got my master's while I was teaching, and then the deal was that when he was working as a full-time engineer, that he would put me through a PhD program. So we moved to Maryland, and then I began a PhD program in human development at the University of Maryland with an emphasis in child development.
Fantastic. Well, you mentioned that there were certain life events that kind of prevented you to go directly into graduate school. So would you mind talking about what you see as the usual process of getting a PhD and how your path differed?
I think a lot of students go directly from undergrad to grad school and work on a PhD that way. And so by the time they're finished with their graduate degree, they may be mid to late 20s. After undergrad, I was physically and intellectually exhausted. I was also ready just to earn a little bit of money, wanting to use my teaching certificate a little bit, wanting to get married, and Cliff was also very much wanting to get another undergrad degree that would require 4 years. So I made the decision to put grad school on hold. It was not for me. I was not ready to go to grad school. Even though I knew I was going to go, I was not ready to go full-time straight from undergrad. Too tired and no money. So I ended up teaching for 5 years, 4 of which I was married to Cliff, working on well, I'm still married to Cliff, but 4 of which putting him through school, working on a part-time master's, and then in my late 20s, I was ready to focus on a full-time PhD program.
So at that point in time, what encouraged you at the graduate school level? Was there any how was your relationship with your advisor? Was he good in encouraging your graduate degree?
I actually had a fantastic advisor at the University of Maryland, Nathan Fox. And when I began as a grad student, he was actually a new tenure track assistant professor. I think he had only been there maybe 1 or 2 years. And so he had a new research lab, had some graduate students. I started the program my first year and was actually assigned to him. It was a little different back then. I applied to the program, and then the program, based upon my interests, assigned me to be his advisee. He was very encouraging. Of course, he was setting up a new lab and getting going. He was very encouraging. As a non-traditional grad student, I had had this teaching experience and this master's degree that I brought with me. So he knew that I could be successful as a grad student. I also, because of my age and quite frankly because of how long I'd been married, I was also very interested in starting a family. So while I was a grad student, a PhD student at Maryland, Cliff and I had 2 children. Our daughter was born at the end of my first year, and then 6.5 years later, my son was born as I was finishing up dissertation data collection. And my advisor was just fabulous, very encouraging, very thoughtful, very much worked with me as a grad student and as a a mom having children while I was a graduate student. And to this day, he constantly asks about my children, wants to know how they're doing, continues to be a fantastic mentor to me.
That's great. So, with having a family and pursuing your graduate career, how did you balance your personal life and then your professional life?
That's always tough, right? Because to be a graduate student who doesn't have a family is incredibly tough. To be a graduate student who has a family, and especially infants, is quite challenging. And I made some personal decisions, and first of all, it took me longer to get through graduate school than I think is typical. I had a master's when I began the program at Maryland, and I was not a 4 or 5 year graduate student. It took me a good while to get through the PhD program. I began, I'd say it took me 7 to 8 years, but I had 2 children during that time, and with each of my children I took a significant amount of time off when they were infants to focus on them. So that was one decision I made, was to, and the program at Maryland allowed me to do that, to take the time off and to sort of step away for many months and then to come back and be a full-time graduate student again. But even when my children got to be close to a year old and I came back to graduate school, it's still difficult because they're still infants and they still need a lot of mom time. I put a significant amount of effort into finding daycare that I was really happy with, and that's a long process, so I think that was critical. So high quality daycare. I also, unfortunately, sacrificed my sleep time. Something has to give. So my graduate school experience, quite frankly, was once I was back in grad school and my children were in daycare, I would pick them up, and remember, my children are 6 years apart, so I had my daughter, and then she was in kindergarten when my son was born. So their infancies were spread by a significant amount of time. So when I was at home and my children were at home, I'm a mom, and that's what I do. And then once I put them to bed, then I would kick back into grad student mode, and that's when I would do my reading and my studying and my homework and my writing papers and my analyzing data. So I wouldn't go to bed until 12 or 1 every night, and I didn't get up, I would get up at 6 the next morning, so I didn't get a lot of sleep. And I was willing to do that in grad school. Didn't watch TV, didn't do pleasure reading, didn't have any hobbies for that period of time in grad school. Now, things are very different now that my children, once my children started getting bigger, it was very different. But when they were infants, it was quite challenging. And those were the decisions that I made to get through that situation.
Would you have any piece of advice for incoming female scholars who are on this path to graduate school and the scientific path and want to have a family? Do you have any advice or any tips?
I think it's very doable. It always bothers me when I hear a young woman say, well, I can't be a grad student because I want children, or even worse, I can't be a professor at a large university because I want to be a mom, because those are not mutually exclusive. You can absolutely do both. But your path can be a little different. Now, not for everyone, but for me it was. So my advice would be focus on your children, because that's critical, absolutely critical. Some programs are very conducive to new moms and are willing to let mothers, new moms, take a break and focus on their infants, and some aren't. And so I would just check and see if the graduate programs that you're interested in and the mentors that you're interested in working with, what their attitudes are about grad students who have children.
And you think a good way to go about doing that is maybe talk to the current graduate students?
I think talk to the current graduate students, find out about that particular potential mentor's career path, but most definitely talk to other graduate students and see what their experiences are. I was incredibly fortunate to have a mentor who was very supportive. And there are many mentors out there who are very supportive of young women starting families while they're in graduate school.
So Nathan Fox was not only your advisor, he was a mentor.
Absolutely.
So what do you think makes a good mentor?
That's a great question. A great mentor is someone who has the student's best interests at heart. A great mentor is someone who's focused on having that graduate student be prepared to go off and have their own successful scientific career. A great mentor is someone who stays in touch afterwards and who relishes the success of their students. So everything I've said, all of those statements have been student focused, and I think that's the definition of a great mentor.
We focus on the student.
Focus on the students. Because by focusing on the students, we clearly, students are members of the faculty members research team, and professors cannot be successful researchers without grad students.
It's true.
It's absolutely true. They cannot. But a model of where the faculty member is focused on the student can very much result in the faculty member benefiting from the research that the student does. So that's the key, student focused.
So a successful mentor would be student focused. So what would make a successful graduate student? What made you a successful graduate student?
I think a successful graduate student has to be very driven. They very quickly appreciate that graduate school is not like undergrad. As busy as you were as an undergrad, it does not compare at all.
That's a hard, thing to get to your mind, thinking that, undergrad was kind of hard. It's probably the same.
It is. Well, I always tell students, think about how hard you worked in high school and then you got to college, and college was nothing like high school. Well, it's the same thing, but probably times 3. It's as much as you worked and as busy as you were as an undergrad, grad school does not compare. So I think having the mindset that it's incredibly time demanding and it's all consuming to be a successful graduate student, you have to have the mindset that this is what I do. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. This is what I do. This is what I do in the evenings. This is what I do on the weekends. I can still have fun and I can still hang out with my friends. And if I have a family, clearly I need to be family focused first. Definitely, my family comes first. But I'm not going to have a lot of time a lot of free time as a grad student. That's my formula for a successful grad student. Works really hard and then realizes that this is what I do, so this is where my time goes.
Fantastic. So it seemed that you were fortunate enough to have a good program, a great advisor and a mentor that helped you go through some life circumstances that didn't allow you to go straight into graduate school. Did you face any other challenges while an undergrad, a graduate student, or anything like that?
No, I'm a first generation college student. So my parents were always very focused on us going to college. So that was quite clear. I think on some level, some members of my family were puzzled by why I would want a PhD. Not my mom and dad, but other family members. I remember my grandfather, whom I adored, saying to me, why do you want to do that? You've got a master's degree, why do you want to do that? Why do you want a PhD? Never done in a mean way, but just a I don't get it kind of way.
Yeah, I still have to tell my grandmother that, yes, I'm a doctor, but not that kind of doctor.
Yes.
And it got to a point that I just let her go, because no matter how much I
Yes.
explain it to her, it still doesn't register.
My husband's family would have these wonderful conversations that really made me smile back then and make me smile now. Talking about his grandmother loved to say, "Now we have a doctor in the family," and then one of his aunts would say, "Oh, but she's not a real doctor." And even back then, it made me laugh, and it just makes me smile now and has good memories. So. I find those stories cute. They didn't upset me back then. I found them amusing. But it's I think being a first generation college student, you're forging a path that members in your family don't know anything about. And so if you go on to a PhD, so my family's been very encouraging, very supportive, and kind of wondering why I'm doing what I'm doing once in a while.
I can understand that. So you're in a graduate program. You're getting your PhD. You graduated. What happened next?
Well, I actually decided to take a visiting assistant professor job. My husband and I are both from the South, and I did my graduate work at Maryland while he had a full-time job in Maryland with the Department of Defense. And so we were very anxious to get back to the South. And there was a visiting assistant professor job at the University of South Carolina in the psychology department. And so I applied for and got that job. So I spent 3 years at South Carolina teaching courses, undergrad and graduate courses in developmental psychology, and had my own research lab, collected data, research data from infants. My PhD is in human development, but most of the training in our department is very similar. It's a human development department, and part of the professors were basic research, very similar to developmental psychology, and some of the professors were very applied, and the mentor I had was a basic research researcher, and so my fit with the psychology department was pretty easy. So I spent 3 years at South Carolina.
What type of research did you do there?
At South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
I did my graduate career as an infant researcher, and I'm very interested in infant cognitive development, mostly interested in individual differences in infant cognitive development. So all of my graduate work was done from a electrophysiological, looking at brain electrical activity and how that correlates with how infants perform on different types of little memory and attention tasks. At South Carolina, I continued the same kind of work, adding another electrophysiological measure to my repertoire, adding heart rate measures to my repertoire. So I was there 3 years and then began my tenure track position here at Virginia Tech. So I'm a brand new tenure track assistant professor at age 40. So I think that's a bit different than most first-year tenure track assistant professors. And since I've come to Virginia Tech, my research has expanded to include longitudinal research. So now in my lab, we do work on the cognitive development of infants, preschoolers, children in middle childhood, college students. We do research on, as I mentioned, individual differences in cognition, research on individual differences in emotion, and have a more encompassing view of what development looks like.
Well, that's definitely fantastic, and it's the CAP lab.
Yes.
The Cognitive Affect and Physiology
Yep.
lab. Well, that sounds really, really interesting. And I think that if you don't mind, we would leave on, I think, a very important question. This scientific journey series that we're doing is really for these incoming scholars, either through the IMSD program, so they're entering a graduate program, or the prep program, so they're in the in-between part, post-bac, so in between undergrad and graduate school. So if you can give them any, like, a piece of advice, or if you wish somebody would have told you something when you were going through your path, what would that have been?
Well, let me answer the piece of advice for the IMSD or the prep scholars. I think the opportunity to work with an established researcher is a golden opportunity. So for the IMSD scholars who come to work with a specific mentor, or who come to do a rotation and then select on a mentor, my advice would be is to take advantage of every opportunity, soak up everything you can from that particular faculty member. For the prep scholars who come and do the 1 year between undergrad and grad school, that's a year that will incredibly enhance your grad school application. So my advice would be is to take every opportunity to get as much research experience as you can. Seek out either the faculty member you've been assigned with, seek out face-to-face time with that faculty member, with their graduate students, learn everything you can about everything that's going on in that research lab, because that will set you up to be in great shape as a new grad student the following year, and will make your thinking so much more advanced about what it means to be a grad student and what it means to be a scientist than someone coming straight from undergrad. So my advice would be is to take advantage of all those opportunities, lots of face time with a faculty member, lots of face time with members of that research team, the grad students and the research assistants.
Great. And any tips for them?
Work hard.
That's a good theme.
I think have the mindset that this is what I do, this is my job, this is intense, this is concentrated, and to go in with that attitude.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for once again agreeing to do this scientific journey session with us, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome.